Why, hello. Welcome back to An Escape from Reality. I'm Jack Brunót, and I talk all things art and entertainment. And today, we are talking about my top 10 books that I read for the first time in 2024. These are not books that came out strictly in 2024, just the books that I read for the first time. In fact, there are no books that came out in 2024 that will be featured in this video. Maybe next year. Subscribe, wait a year, and find out. This is my first ever booktube video, so please bear with me. I am by no means a book critic or book reviewer, just a book appreciator and avid reader for some time now. Some of the books that we are talking about today I have physical copies of, and others I don't, but just trust me, I did read all of these. I actually read even more than 10 books this year, believe it or not. Maybe it was 11, but you'll never know. Don't take the list too seriously. This is just an excuse for me to talk about some of my favorite books I read this year. And considering this is a top 10, it's pretty safe to say that even at the bottom of my list, at my number 10, I didn't hate any of the books on this list. I'd like to think I've gotten pretty good at choosing the media that I consume. I'm not the type of person to read or watch or play anything that I know I'm not gonna like, just for the sake of content. No judgment to the people who do that. We need people in the industry to tell us what is and is not good, because it is impossible to read every single book. If your favorite book is not on this list, just remember I am only one person. I'm not an AI who is illegally stealing all of these books and reading them and consuming them. All of that being said, I am proven wrong sometimes, so I try to get out of my comfort zone as much as I can. In addition to doing the top 10 list, I'm also going to be giving away some awards to some specific books on the list. The award categories are characters, world, writing style, cover art, main character, and page turner. A book can win more than one award on the list, but don't worry, I didn't get carried away and gave all of the awards to one book. Also, this is not an objective list. This is very biased. I am a human being. After all, I do have biases. This is very subjective, just based on what I like and value in a book. If our opinions were the same, that would be kind of odd. However, you'd be pretty chill for it. There will be timestamps in the description, but this is a spoiler-free video. I would love to hear some of your favorite books in the comments, and also some of your favorites from my list as well. However, I need everyone to remember that we are all here for the same reason. We love books. So being mean to each other in the comments is never productive. Okay, this intro has been long enough, so let's get into the top 10. At number 10, we have Uzumaki by Junji Ito. So Uzumaki was the first ever manga that I read, and it is the only manga on this list. And I do personally think that it is a fantastic start into the manga genre, but it is certainly not for the faint of heart. This book is in the horror genre, and it follows an entire town as they become obsessed with spirals. Now, it's important to note that I actually watched the television series that came out in 2024 before reading the manga. And while I did like the show, especially the animation style, which is a similar art style to the manga, I did have some criticisms of the show as compared to the novel. Those criticisms did somewhat transfer to the novel, but the show did get me to read the novel, so that is something to be said. Now, the biggest positive of this novel is the cosmic horror elements. Cosmic horror is definitely one of, if not my favorite kind of horror. It's the exploration and the fear of the unknown, which is often connected to space, hence the name cosmic horror. In this case, it isn't really connected to space. Uzumaki is a fantastic testament to the cosmic horror genre, and it is easily the best part of the book. Once again, no spoilers, but looking at the ending of the novel, it perfectly toes the fine line between explaining what's going on and not explaining what's going on, which I think is the key to nailing cosmic horror. And it's also why it's so difficult to pull it off, because you want to be able to tie all of the loose ends up by the end, but you don't want the fear to go away, right? Uzumaki nails this perfectly with its ending. My biggest issue with it is some of the events, at least throughout the novel until we get to the ending, do kind of feel random. Things happen characters come and go, and then they're never talked about or acknowledged again. Now, I do think everything is tied up at the end correctly, but I do wish there was a little bit more of a connection to all of it. Junji Ito is known for his short story collections, and while this is not a short story collection, it did kind of give off that vibe. I almost wish the novel did not have a main character, and instead each chapter covered a different character, either going through this spiral obsession or experiencing it firsthand. I'm not going to be giving an award to every single book on this list, but we have our first award for Uzumaki, and that is the cover art award. I love pretty much all of the cover arts on this list, but what I absolutely adore about the Uzumaki cover is that it nails the cosmic horror element just like the rest of the book does. You see these two girls with spirals in their hair, and it just makes you wonder what the hell is going on. Not to mention, I love the color palette here too. It truly is a work of art. At the number 9 spot, we have a older novel, I Have No Mouth and I Must Scream by Harlan Ellison. I promise not every single entry on this list is horror. However, this is another novel in the horror genre. This novel follows the 5 remaining humans on Earth after an AI takes over and kills everyone. However, the AI then figures out how to make the 5 remaining humans stay alive so it can torture them for the rest of time. If you can't tell, this book is a little bleak, and when it comes to the book community, that seems to be the common criticism of it, but I do think just saying that it's a bleak novel kind of misses the point. I feel like the point of the entire novel is actually to show the bonds that humans can create and how love will always persist over hate no matter what the circumstances are, even if the ending is also bleak just like the rest of the book. Ellison is known for making very nihilistic books, however, parallels to our reality, and this is by far his most popular novel. It is technically a short story, but it is well worth it to read it by itself. Now, if the idea of an AI killing everyone except for 5 people and then keeping them alive sounds kind of unrealistic and almost like plot armor, trust me, the reason it's doing it is so interesting. I will almost most definitely make another video on this book. It is so fascinating to me. So if you want to be prepared for that video, and that's the only reason, go read the book. Our next book at number 8 is a little bit of a guilty pleasure novel for me. It is The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes by Suzanne Collins. For those who are unaware, this is the prequel novel to the Hunger Games trilogy, of which I am already very much a fan of. I love the books and the movies, and I watched the movie and read the book in tandem. Now, can you read this book as a standalone novel without the other 3? Yeah, probably. Will you get the same experience though? I don't think so. I don't think The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes can stand alone as a solo novel, but for anyone who is already a fan of the Hunger Games, you have to go read this book. The book follows the origin story of the main antagonist of the original trilogy, President Snow. What I found really interesting about this novel compared to the original trilogy is it is way less action-packed. Both the book and the movie almost feel like a Shakespearean play in the way that it unfolds its plot. The ending was very unexpected. While there are certain elements that ended up being obvious, mainly just because we know where the series is gonna go, the ending did actually surprise me with what they decided to do with the characters. Frankly, what they did with the ending is the biggest reason this even made the top 10, and that coupled with the expansion of the Hunger Games lore, I just had to talk about it here. I'll talk a little bit more about the differences between the novel and the book when I do my ranking of the movies I watched this year list, so be on the lookout for that if you are at all interested. At number 7, we are finally talking about a book that I actually have a physical copy of. We are talking about Fahrenheit 451 by Ray Bradbury. There are a couple of classics on this list that I hadn't read before this year. I went on a little bit of a classic reading spree this year, and some of them were bound to make my top 10. This one is actually the most recent book that I read on the list. In fact, I just finished it like a week ago at the time of recording this video. And considering the different events that are happening around the world and also a certain specific country, reading this novel at the current moment was, how do I put it? Nerve-wracking. It's shocking how relevant this novel still is, despite it having come out in the 50s. Now, if you're not aware of the plot, basically we follow Guy Montag, who is a fireman fireman. However, he's not a typical fireman. As opposed to putting out fires, he starts fires. Specifically, he goes around burning books. Because books and other forms of media that allow you to become an educated person are illegal in this world. Now, while that is the most prevalent element in this book, I think it covers a lot more that is so relevant to what is going on in the world right now. For example, Bradbury seems to have predicted the attention span problem in our society. Now, there's no doubt that there probably was an attention span problem back then too, but it does kind of seem like it's getting worse and worse, especially with the addition of social media and advancing technology. I'm by no means criticizing technology. Certain elements of technology have been very helpful to the world. I mean, I'm literally talking into a microphone and at a camera right now, but just the idea that booktube and book talk are kind of niche now, and the literacy rates going lower and lower every single year does kind of show how well this book predicted the future. If you want to ignore all of the political elements of this book, it is also just a really solid story. I wouldn't say it was a fun read, but it did kind of have a hopeful and uplifting ending. In a existential way, I would say it's like a bittersweet ending. I would recommend anyone to read this book. It's not super long, so if you're not the biggest fan of the writing style like I was, or if it makes you ridiculously depressed, try to push through it. I think it could teach you a lot about the human experience. Staying in the realm of politics, at number 6, we have Animal Farm by George Orwell. So both this novel and Fahrenheit 451, I was assigned to read them back in high school. I didn't really get into reading until a couple of years ago, so I didn't exactly actually read them when I was supposed to. Whoops. I hope none of my former teachers are watching this. However, even back then I had a lust for stories, and when I found out about both of these books, I was very much intrigued, and I knew one day I was going to read them. And that day happened to be over the course of like a week or two for both of these books in 2024. I would say this is even more important than Fahrenheit 451, but I think they kind of work together in tandem. This novel is a happy-go-lucky novel about farm animals, as they cause an uprising on the farm, warding off their human overlords. Basically, farm animals start to evolve and become more intelligent, therefore realizing that the labor and products that they are providing to their farmers has been way more beneficial to the humans as opposed to the barn animals. This is not a spoiler, but eventually, after the humans have left, the pigs kind of take up the role. And I'll just leave it at that. Animal Farm focuses on many different themes, but the biggest one being the control of other people, and how easy it can be to use other elements like religion and philosophy to influence people. Okay, let's stop talking about all of the depressing stuff and get into evolution. My number 5 spot is All Tomorrows by Nemo Ramjet. I have technically been a fan of this novel for a couple of years, but I hadn't actually read it until this year. There is a lot of lore and YouTube videos about this novel that you can explore, so you can know everything there is to know about this novel without actually ever reading it. That being said, I have been a fan of it for quite some time, so I felt the need to actually read it, and it very much lived up to the hype. You see, the majority of the space in this novel is taken up by these gorgeous and haunting illustrations. This is the best piece of speculative evolution that I have ever seen, and also a fantastic science fiction novel. The story spans billions of years, so there is no main character, only what happens over those billions of years. The story starts with humans migrating to Mars and eventually evolving into 2 different species, the humans and the Martians. Eventually, a much more intelligent species shows up and starts fighting with the humans and Martians, therefore winning, and this more powerful alien species starts experimenting with the human bodies. I believe this is the only novel that currently right now there are no physical copies of it. However, the physical copies are coming, and this is not a sponsorship. I'm just a fan of the book. Please sponsor me. I love you. Anyway, this book is very different than all of the other books on this list, but please go give it a try. As I said, you can really learn about this book for free on YouTube. Go support the guy. Mans is a genius. At number 4, we have The Beginning Starling by K.A. Applegate, which happens to be the 54th book in the Animorphs series, the final book as well. Okay, I'm going to admit, me putting this on the list is very much cheating. I had read this book before this year, but I really just wanted to have an excuse to talk about the Animorphs series, and this is my video, but I promise I won't do it again. Please do not click off the video. So I reread some of my favorite books within the Animorphs series this year, and I hadn't read them since like middle school, so I forgot a lot of what happened, so that's why I'm kind of cheating and putting it here. I'm really just going to talk about the series as a whole, not just this ending. Animorphs is one of, if not my favorite book series of all time. Frankly, I think it is a underappreciated series, specifically because of the cover art becoming a meme. Also, these books are technically for kids, but they shouldn't be. They really shouldn't be. The entire series talks about war and genocide. Like, I feel like that's something that kids should definitely be aware of, but should these be considered kids' books? I wouldn't say so. These are very mature novels wrapped up in a concept that children can understand. It's kind of like Avatar: The Last Airbender in the sense, even though that show is technically for kids, the majority of people watching it in 2024 are adults, specifically the adults that loved it when they were kids. The writing holds up so well. So the series follows 6 characters, and each book in the series follows one of those 6 characters. At the very beginning, they are wandering a construction site when an alien spacecraft crashes right in front of them. This alien, known as an Andalite, then comes out and tells them about the war that is going on right under their noses. Turns out there is a different alien species known as the Yeerks who are infesting people through their ear canals. They are taking over their brains, and they are slowly seizing control of Earth. Because of the crash, the Andalite is bleeding out. So he gives the technology to these kids that allows them to turn into any animal. This technology is a weapon that the Andalites use. So yeah, the concept is absolutely batshit insane. I can admit that. But behind the crazy plot is some of the best character writing and development that I have ever seen in frankly any other property. And as I said earlier before, it has some very philosophical and political concepts that are relevant to today. Also, we are going to be giving away our second award for the video to the beginning, that being the character award. I am much more into character development and character arcs as opposed to plot when it comes to most stories, not just in books. And I think that might be because of my love for these novels early in my life. Truly, the characters that we see in this series, not just our 6 main characters, are so fascinating to explore. They're all so different, yet come together and interact with each other in such an intelligent way. I truly praise the world that Catherine Applegate was able to create in this novel. I have not read any of her other books, just the core Animorphs series, but it definitely does make me curious about the other stuff that she has written, even though she is definitely way more known for Animorphs. I know there is a beloved community out there who loves these books, but frankly, it deserves to be a lot bigger than it is, so please go check them out. I know the number of books may seem intimidating. 54 is a lot of books, but just know one book equals about 1/4 of a normal novel. Each of the books are more like novellas as opposed to full-fledged books. Also, since I have the final book on this list, I might as well just mention that the series ends with a bang and a fantastic conclusion, so you won't be wasting your time if you read all of these books. Okay, getting on with the actual list. At number 3, we have Nevernight by Jay Kristoff. This was the first book that I read this year. Truly a fantastic way to start off my 2024. This is the only fantasy novel on the list, and it falls pretty well into the dark fantasy genre. It follows a teenage girl of royalty after her entire family is executed because of treason. That's not a spoiler, that is on the back of the book. She then sets off for revenge, enlisting in a school of assassins. Now, unlike many of the assassins in this school, she has a little bit of a secret, something up her sleeve. The shadows. She can control shadows, kind of. This is the first book in a trilogy. I have not read the other two books, but I am planning on doing that probably in 2025. This book is very beloved, but I think it's underappreciated when it comes to the fantasy genre. The world building is fantastic despite only focusing on one main character. This is a dark, gritty, and very cynical novel with twists, turns, and giant squids. What I found really interesting that really sets this novel apart from other novels in the fantasy genre is the fact that it was a slow burn. The first half of the novel is actually kind of slow. Not boring, but definitely slow. It really starts to pick up at that halfway mark, but still kind of just treks along until the very end, which is really fast-paced and boombastic. Also a fantastic setup for the next novel, which I'm curious to see what direction that goes. My only true criticism of this book is that the main character, Mia, has the "I'm not like other girls" disease. It's by no means overbearing on the story, but she very much doesn't seem like the character who is ever going to get one-upped or caught off guard. She really handles everything quite well. I wish we could have seen a little bit more exploration into her mental, because I mean, after all, her family was executed, so I don't think many people can just shrug that off. Now, her mental instability is definitely there. I just wish we could have seen a little bit more exploration into that. That criticism is from a place of love, though. I really, really liked this novel. I mean, it's at number 3, so. Now, we have some more awards to give away for Nevernight. It is the first book on the list that will be getting 2 awards. The first award being the World Award. As I said, it has fantastic world building. It uses annotations, so it doesn't take any attention away from the main character, but it also uses the annotations throughout the novel to influence the plot. The annotations are by no means necessary, but it will strengthen your bond with the story. The other award I am giving to it is the Writing Award. There are certain passages in this that read like a beautiful poem. I actually learned a lot about writing when it came to reading this novel. It really shows how writing itself is an art form. We are now at our number 2 spot, and that happens to be The Silent Patient by Alex Michael Eades. Chances are, if you're a regular on BookTube or BookTok, you probably know this novel. You probably have even read this novel. Yes, I just got to it. I have so many books to get through. Like, look right there. This is honestly one of the best crime novels that I have ever read. And I think one of the bigger reasons as to why people are so interested in it is because of the intriguingly different plot. There are so many crime novels that follow a homicide detective just looking for a serial killer. And while, don't get me wrong, that can be done very well, it is very uncommon for us to get a main character who is a psychotherapist who isn't even looking for a serial killer. You see, the plot follows a psychotherapist who just took a new job at a psych ward, where a certain famous patient has been institutionalized. This patient used to be a famous artist until she shockingly murdered her husband in cold blood and then refused to say a single word after that point. Our main character is definitely at the psych ward just to do their regular job, but they do admit that they find the case fascinating and they want to get to the bottom of why Alicia will not speak anymore. Did she kill her husband, or is she innocent? The answer, will believe it or not, actually shock you. We are giving away some more awards to this book, the first being the Main Character Award. The true magic of The Silent Patient comes from the perspective of our main character, the psychotherapist. It illustrates the importance of perspective. Saying any more will be a spoiler, so I am just going to leave it at that. Seriously, go into this novel as blind as possible. See what all of the hype is about, because it truly does deserve the hype that it has gotten. I am also giving The Silent Patient the Page Turner Award as well. Many thrillers are supposed to be page turners. That's how they're written. Have you ever noticed how short the chapters are in thriller novels? Well, this book succeeds in that element to a T. That concludes our awards, which means I'm not giving any awards to our number 1 spot, but that does not take away from this novel, because it is truly one of the best books that I have ever read, not just this year, but in my entire life. It is another book that is widely beloved. At our number one spot, we have Project Hail Mary by Andy Weir, the same author that wrote The Martian. And apparently they're also making this novel into a movie as well. I will remain cautiously optimistic about that because I was not the biggest fan of the movie for The Martian. Now, explaining the plot, I'm going to try to be as vague as possible because this is another novel that you should go into as blind as possible. We follow a space explorer as he wakes up on his ship alone with amnesia. He then finds out that he is the last hope for humanity, and if he does not complete his mission, everyone on Earth will die. This book definitely takes itself seriously, but despite what it sounds like, it is not too overly serious. It actually has a pretty upbeat approach to the story. It's very fun and whimsical, especially with the main character. He really is the poster child for dad jokes. This did come off a little grating and odd at first, but if you just give it a chance, you will find a true masterpiece in this novel. It is truly a fantastic journey from cover to cover, and I will never stop praising it. If you are into science fiction and you have not read this novel, what are you doing? Go do that. I would especially say that if you're into just general science. This book is shockingly accurate when it comes to its science. Andy Weir has openly talked about how many different scientific specialists he consulted with to write this novel and make it as accurate as possible. And he definitely flexes this knowledge across the entire thing. I mean, mine as well. He did his research. I'm gonna have to cut out so many things that I've said because of spoilers. I want to talk about this book so much more. I'll probably make a video about it, but seriously, just go read it. It's my number one. I'm trying to put you on. That is it. That is my top 10 list of books that I read in 2024. I hope you got some new recommendations from it. If you're still here, thank you so much for watching the video in its entirety. If you liked this one, you might like some of the others. And before you click off this video, just remember, don't let anyone tell you what you can and can't do in your life. Stay safe out there. Abu bye.